My family ignored me for years. At Thanksgiving, I casually mentioned my $160 million fortune. My sister's jaw dropped, and my dad just stared in silence. I learned how to be invisible when I was 9 years old. That was the year my sister Sophie turned 18, and she received her first automobile, a shiny new BMW wrapped in a large red ribbon in our driveway. I watched from my bedroom window as she shrieked and danced up and down, hugging our parents as the neighbors came to congratulate them on raising such a wonderful daughter. Nobody saw me standing there in my second-hand sweater and thrift shop slacks. Sophie was the golden kid since she was born. She was 7 years older than me and arrived while my parents were still youthful and ambitious, believing they could shape the perfect daughter. By the time I arrived, I believe I was more of an accident than a plan. The zeal had faded off. The baby books remained empty. After my first birthday, the photo book was no longer updated. My parents had a modestly successful insurance firm in Connecticut. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. Or at least Sophie was. She went to Westfield Academy, a private institution that cost more per year than most people's automobiles. I went to Franklin Public School, which was 3 blocks from our house and had ceiling tiles that leaked when it rained and textbooks with copyright dates from the 2000s. When I questioned why Sophie got to go to private school when I didn't, my mother gave me a look like I was asking why the sky was blue. Sophie requires more stimulus. Sweetheart, she is talented. You're doing very great where you are. Fine. That term tormented me as a youngster. Sophie was extraordinary, smart, and bound for greatness. I was okay. Sophie's 17th birthday present was a vacation to Paris with our parents. For mine, I spent $30 on a grocery store cake. I bought a second-hand graphing calculator for school because mine had broken, and I knew better than to ask for a replacement. Initially, I was not bitter about the inequity. I was too young to realize what was going on. I figured this was how families functioned. Some students got more because they deserved it. I assimilated that thinking until it became a part of my personality. But I also developed something my sister never had: ingenuity. While Sophie was having French and violin lessons, I was training myself to code using library books and free internet courses. While she spent her summers at pricey camps in the Adirondacks, I worked at a small grocery store and saved every dime. While she was deciding which Ivy League school she would go, I was applying to state I was accepted into the University of Institutions and praying for scholarships. Connecticut on a full academic scholarship. My parents treated me to supper at Applebee's to celebrate. When Sophie was admitted to Yale and my parents paid full tuition, they had a garden party for 50 people complete with a catered buffet and a champagne toast. I ate 3 sliders and left the party early. Nobody noticed. College became my escape route. I double majored in computer science and mathematics, worked 2 part-time jobs, and spent my leisure time honing my talents. Most of my vacations were spent away from home. I told my parents I was busy with job or studies, which was true, but really I couldn't stand watching Sophie return home to fanfare and joy while I got sidetracked with, "Oh, you're here too." During my junior year, something snapped. To supplement my income, I've started working as a freelance developer, creating websites and applications for small businesses. One of my clients reported that their organization was having inventory management issues and was wasting thousands of dollars due to inefficient supply chain tracking. Over the Christmas break, I created a solution for them. It was tough, but it worked. They paid me $6,500, which was the most money I'd ever seen at once. But here's what was important. They informed others about it. Within 6 months, I had 10 organizations requesting comparable solutions. I reduced to part-time student status and focused entirely on developing better, more complicated software. I slept 4 hours a night, lived off ramen and coffee, and programmed till my fingers ached. The software evolved. I dubbed it SupplySync, and it grew into something far greater than I could have imagined. A full supply chain management platform capable of integrating with current systems and providing real-time statistics. I was 21 years old and ran a real technology firm from my dorm room. I earned my bachelor's degree at the age of 22. Sophie had graduated from Yale the previous year and was working at a top marketing business in Manhattan, living in an apartment that our parents had helped her acquire. They were quite proud. They would exhibit images of her corner office as if they had created it themselves. I was still invisible. They were aware that I had graduated and that I was working with computers, but they were uninterested in the facts. When I tried to explain what SupplySync accomplished, my father would graciously nod and shift the conversation to Sophie's recent client presentation. So I stopped trying to explain. There was one occasion, however, that nearly destroyed my determination to remain silent. I was 23, and I went home for Easter, which was one of the few occasions I had made the journey. Sophie had recently become engaged to her first fiancé, a lawyer named Ethan, whom my parents admired. The engagement lasted 8 months until he cheated on her. But that day, she was flaunting her ring to everyone who came through the door. I just signed my second large contract, for $300,000, which will allow me to recruit 5 additional workers. I was unable to suppress my enthusiasm. Over supper, I tried again. I have some good news, I announced during a gap in the Sophie worship session. Mom glanced at me with mild interest. Oh, did you meet someone, honey? No, it's for work. I recently signed a major customer. The contract is wonderful, dear, Dad said, without glancing up from his phone. Sophie, your mother and I were thinking we should have an engagement party here at the house, maybe rent a tent for the backyard. Sophie shrieked, and the discussion changed completely. I excused myself, went upstairs to my childhood bedroom, which had been converted into Sophie's gift wrapping station, complete with rolls of expensive paper and elaborate bows, and called my business partner, Olivia. My news was dying in my throat as I watched them plan a party for a relationship that would not even last a year. She had been with me since the beginning, a bright developer I'd met through a coding forum. They don't care, I told her, sitting on the floor, surrounded by Sophie's wedding preparation supplies. Then stop telling them, Olivia answered simply. Lily, you don't need their approval. Build your empire, let the art speak for itself. That talk altered everything. Olivia was correct. I'd been looking for crumbs of recognition from people who would never see me as anything more than Sophie's forgettable little sister. From that point forward, I channeled every ounce of hurt, dismissal, and forgotten moment into creating something undeniable. At 23, I got my first major contract, a regional logistics company that paid me $250,000 to implement SupplySync throughout their entire operation. I hired my first 2 employees, both brilliant developers I met online, who believed in what we were building. At 24, a national retailer signed on, then another, and another. At 25, I had 47 employees and $7 million in annual revenue. At 26, a venture capital firm offered me $18 million for 30% of the company, which I reduced to 20% for $12 million. My lawyer nearly had a heart attack at my confidence, but I understood what SupplySync was worth. I could have informed my family then, and I could have turned up at Christmas with news of my achievement, proving that I was more than simply okay. But something stopped me. Perhaps pride. Maybe it was the memory of every dismissive comment, every forgotten birthday, every time I'd been an afterthought in my own family. But I wanted to see how far I could go while they weren't looking. I wanted to build something so undeniable that they'd have to see me. So I stayed quiet, lived modestly in a small apartment in Boston, drove a Honda Civic, and kept building. At 27, SupplySync went international. We signed contracts in Canada, Mexico, and the United Kingdom, and revenue reached $25 million. I moved into a nicer apartment, but nothing flashy, and bought a nicer car, a Lexus, but kept the Honda too. When I was 28, the acquisition offers began to come in, from tech behemoths who wanted to absorb SupplySync into their empires, offering exorbitant sums of money. I turned them all down because this was mine, and I wasn't ready to give it up. The first $120 million offer came from a Silicon Valley behemoth, but they wanted to completely dismantle SupplySync and integrate the technology into their existing platform, so I declined within 24 hours. The second offer was $170 million from a European conglomerate. Better money, but they wanted to transfer me to Frankfurt and phase out my whole staff within a year. My board thought I was mad. Lily, these are life-changing offers, one investor told me during a heated meeting. You're leaving hundreds of millions on the table. I'm not interested in money that comes with conditions that betray everything I've built, I said. SupplySync is more than simply code. It's a team. It is a vision. Claire Matthews, the CEO of Innovix Technologies, was a woman who had created her own business from the ground up, and she saw the value of SupplySync. We met for coffee in Boston, and she presented a plan that honored what I had produced. I don't want to absorb SupplySync, Claire explained, swirling her coffee. I'd want to increase it. You remain CEO. Your crew remains intact. We give the necessary infrastructure and cash to become genuinely global. You maintain your vision. We give you the resources to make it bigger than you ever could alone. I listened to her pitch for 2 hours, and by the end, I knew this was different. The negotiations took 3 months, and my lawyers and their lawyers argued over every detail. I fought for my team, ensuring generous retention bonuses and equity packages. Claire grinned across the conference table when we eventually agreed on $280 million with all of my demands fulfilled, saying, "You drive a hard bargain." I battled for creative autonomy, the power to reject choices that jeopardized our essential beliefs, and everything else that was important to me. "I know my worth," I said. "I've spent my entire life having others undervalue me. I'm finished with that." Innovix Technologies made a